We are about to enter the Choose Your Legends hype time of the year, where we not only get our new brave heroes, but also get refines for Choose Your Legends 5. With that in mind, I want to talk about the effects that Choose Your Legends 5's heroes could get to completely break the meta, and who better to start off with than the most controversial hero of Choose Your Legends 5, Gatekeeper. Now before we jump into the tier list, let's quickly go over Gatekeeper and refresh our memories on what he can currently do. So we have Gatekeeper's preference weapon, Charging Horn, and what this effectively does is you get defense plus 3, you can give attack and speed plus 5 to allies within 3 rows or 3 columns, and then he gets some effects based off of how many allies are within that range. So he gets attack and res minus X on the foe, which can be up to 6, and then he also gets follow-up denial. Now what makes Gatekeeper actually special though is this preference B skill, Detailed Report. What this does is it makes it so that foes with range equal 1 cannot move through spaces adjacent to him, and then foes with range equal 2 cannot move through spaces within 2 spaces of himself, and then he also has anti-warp. So that's really the big thing that excels Gatekeeper, is that anti-warp effect. So with that in mind, let's jump into the tier list and talk about some effects he really does need to become meta, and some effects that can really just completely push him over the top and make him one of the most powerful units in the game. The first effect I really want to talk about is one that he should have had in his base weapon, and I don't understand why it wasn't there, and that is a guaranteed follow-up attack. So a guaranteed follow-up attack is just something that Gatekeeper needs, as he is not a fast unit by any means, and in order for Gatekeeper to kill pretty much anything, he needs to be able to double. So a guaranteed follow-up attack is just the most obvious thing that he should get in his refined. If he does not get that, I don't know what IS is thinking, so I pretty much think that's a guaranteed effect he will get in his refined. So we're going to put that in B tier, as it's not anything that will break Gatekeeper, but it is something he does need. Now, let's talk about another effect that could be kind of good, and that's Guard. And I'm going to put this down in C tier, because it is a nice effect, but it's not going to be something that, once again, breaks Gatekeeper, but it is something that we have seen more prevalent in these tanky mage nukes we've seen, like Duo Asker, right? Or even like Goto, where having that Guard is really strong, because a lot of units who need to secure kills rely on specials to do so. So having Guard can really shut down a lot of threats, and I think it can offer Gatekeeper some effects that can allow him to actually act as a frontline unit, which is really what he wants to do, right? He wants to be a support unit, but he also wants to be able to take a hit or two. Now speaking of Guard, I think there is something that he could actually give that would be way better than just base Guard, and that would be a Guard Aura. We've kind of seen this with Winter Sephron's staff, right? Where it can kind of give out a drive guard, but I would love to see if he could give out guard to all allies within that 3 rows and 3 column range he has, right? Imagine how powerful that would be. So I think this is actually one of the best effects he could get, and it's realistic too. I think it wouldn't be something that would completely break the game, but at the same time it'd be extremely valuable. So I'm gonna put this one up in S. What I really think this could do would make Gatekeeper into one of the best Aether8's defense units, because anti-warp would essentially shut down Gale Force as it is, but then when you put the Guard Aura, it makes it really difficult to Gale Force a team, because not only are you shutting down Wings of Mercy, but you're also making it really hard to proc Gale Force as well. So I think this is an extremely powerful effect, and I think it's realistic to see on Gatekeeper, so hopefully we can see that, even though as a Gale Force fan, maybe I don't want to see it, I'm not completely sure, but I think it could be a really good effect for him. Now, another effect that could be good, but isn't going to break him by any means, that would be Defensive Null Follow-Up. Now, Defensive Null Follow-Up is really good on Gatekeeper, and the reason for that is he already has a follow-up denial. So by having Defensive Null Follow-Up, what this would do essentially is make it so that all those slow units who have guaranteed follow-up attacks, instead of just having to win a speed check to double Gatekeeper, they'd actually have to have their own form of no follow-up as well. And it would once again allow Gatekeeper to act as a frontline unit, which is something he could do with his pretty solid defensive bulk. So I'm going to put this down in C tier. It would be nice to see, but once again, it's not something that we're looking for to break Gatekeeper. It's just a nice little effect to add to his already existing kit. Now, another effect that could really help him with his frontlining capabilities would be damage reduction. And I think this is one of the effects that he was missing that was a bit startling to see, because it does kind of make it so that Gatekeeper is pretty squishy overall. Even though he has that nice defensive stat line, nowadays units hit just way too hard if you do not have some source of damage reduction, and because his B slot is used up by Detailed Report, which you pretty much cannot remove in my opinion, you need some kind of damage reduction in there, right? And you can't get it from Guard or from Quick Riposte or even NCD4. So having that built into his weapon would be really nice. Getting 30% or 40% damage reduction would be amazing. So I'm gonna put that nice slot into B tier. Another effect that I think could really just, he absolutely needs is bonus stats. Bonus stats is another effect that's going to go to B tier, as it's something he just should get, and I expect to see this, as this will just make Gatekeeper more bulky and also allow him to have a little bit more firepower, so maybe he can actually secure some kills as well. Now, I think the cool way to give him bonus stats would be give him an improved stat aura. Now, as Gatekeeper currently is, he does have an effect that gives attack and speed plus 5 to allies within the 3 rows and 3 columns. I think what you could do is upgrade that into +5 to all stats to allies within 3 rows and columns and to Gatekeeper himself. And not only would this make his support more powerful, but it would also give Gatekeeper the stats he needs. So I would really love to see a stat aura, and I think that's one of the best effects he could get realistically. So I'm going to put that in A tier. That would just allow him to offer a ton more support on Aetheryte's offense or on defense, so it's a really good effect for him to get. Now, I want to bring up a very interesting effect. This hasn't really been seen in the game necessarily, and that would be a save effect. And I don't mean like near save or far save necessarily, but kind of more of like a pseudo miracle combined with the save effect. I think this effect can be extremely powerful. We've seen this kind of on Fall Maria, right, where she can give out that like drive miracle and save the unit. My idea for it essentially would be if a unit was going to die once per map, you could essentially have Gatekeeper jump in the way and take that hit. And so if Gatekeeper got bulky enough, he could actually survive that hit and also save that unit. I think that would really like synergize thematically with Gatekeeper trying to be that guardian of Garreg Mach, right? So I think that'd be a really cool effect, and it could make him extremely powerful and SD relevant. So I think this is a cool effect he could get. We've never really seen it in the game exactly like this, but I think it could be really awesome to see, and would definitely make him a realistic unit to use in summoner duels. So I'm gonna put this up in S tier. Now, the effect I think would be the funniest to see Gatekeeper get, but would piss off probably half the player base, is Canto Control. Now I'm gonna put this one in A tier. I think a lot of people who are big Gatekeeper fans already have Canto Control on Gatekeeper, so I think it would just piss off so many people, but it is a good effect for Gatekeeper to have, as he is really a denial unit. He's trying to shut things down, and being able to shut down Canto would be really, really good. So I think this would be a great effect for him to get, even though, you know, it is another one of those things that could piss people off. Now, speaking of auras Gatekeeper could get, I think another really powerful one is a dull aura. And what that essentially means is like he could turn off visible stat bonuses on enemies within 3 rows and 3 columns, which would be really strong because it could essentially give your tank or your Omni tank or whoever you're putting out there a big stat advantage without having to rely on running a lull themselves. So I think a dull aura could be really good. I'm gonna put that up in A tier. Not something we've necessarily seen before, but something that could be really nice for him to have. Another aura I would love to see him have is a damage reduction aura. Now we've seen this on Flame with like a damage reduction drive, but I think having it in that 3 rows, 3 columns would be very, very good and can allow him to really support the entire team with damage reduction, which would be really cool because you can use it offensively when you're engaging on units, right, and get kind of like a remote Sparrow or like a remote mirror effect. And then for your tanks as well, getting that like, let's say 30% damage reduction would be really strong. And if it works on him as well, it would be a way for him to get damage reduction while also supporting the team. So it would be very, very synergistic. So for this effect, I'm going to put it up in A tier as well. Now let's talk about an effect that is always on these tier lists and is usually something I have very high demand for, but for Gatekeeper it's going to be a bit lower, and that is Slaying. Now Slaying typically is one of the most in-demand effects you just need, right? You want it on your save units, you want it on your nukes, you pretty much want it on everyone as it just makes specials more consistent. But I think for Gatekeeper it's not the biggest deal unless he tries to become a nuke, which I don't think that's the best role for him. So in this case, essentially all it would do is allow him to like use 2 cooldown specials more effectively, which would be nice, but it's not the biggest deal. Like it's definitely not a game breaker by any means, and so I don't think Slaying's that big of a deal. Not saying it's not good, but I'm only going to put it in A tier, where typically it would probably be like an S or S+, right? Now, another effect everyone has been talking about, I have seen this in every single comment section whenever Gatekeeper is brought up, and that is flat damage reduction and true damage based off like defense, right? Like the Asker effect that Brave Dimitri got. I think this would be really good, right? Obviously, it's a very powerful effect, and it would allow Gatekeeper to not only do a ton more damage, but it would also allow him to act as that frontline unit, which he kind of wants to do, right? It would allow him to be in the front line, take those hits, use Obstruct to stop enemies from getting to the team, and also shut down warping. So it could be a very, very powerful effect. I don't think it's going to be as good as it is on someone like Brave Dimitri, obviously, as he is that Omni tank, but what it could allow Gatekeeper to do is to be a very powerful frontliner while offering support. So I think that would essentially give him 2 roles, which would make him much more usable in a ton more game modes. So I think it is a very, very powerful effect, but I don't think it's as broken as people would imagine it to be on Gatekeeper. So for this one, I'm only going to put it in S tier. Now I saved the best for last, and these are the 5 effects I think that could completely break Gatekeeper and make it one of the most meta units in the game. Let's start off with an NCD aura. That's correct. I would love to see Gatekeeper get a null counter disrupt aura. And what this would essentially do is allow all allies within that 3 rows and 3 columns to counter even if the unit has like Dazzling Slap or Fire Sweep or anything like that. And the reason why this effect would be so extremely powerful is because it would remove the weaknesses of so many Omni tanks and save units. Essentially, Gatekeeper would become one of the best units in the entire game to run in a save ball or even along an Omni tank, and it would just be extremely powerful. Now the problem is that it would completely neuter healers, so all the resurgence of healers we've seen lately was like Fallen Maria or like Duo Elise, it would just completely cripple them and maybe even push them out of the meta because it would be just that powerful. But at the same time, it would give Gatekeeper a very unique effect that no one else in the game has that would be extremely meta relevant. So I think this would be absolutely phenomenal and would definitely take Gatekeeper up a level to become one of the better support units in the entire game. Now another effect Gatekeeper could get that would completely break the game is False Start. That's right, Elamene's signature effect. This effect is ridiculously powerful. Emblem pretty much took over the meta the year she came out, and even now she's an extremely powerful unit. So I think this effect could be really strong, and the best part is it would be on a blessable unit, right? You could put Gatekeeper into any season, which would be ridiculous, because then not only are you getting a really good way to turn off things like Bridal Catria, or like Times Pulse, or Infantry Pulse, or whatever else, but you'd also be able to deny warping. And so I think this would just make Gatekeeper absolutely ridiculous. Anytime we could get False Start blessable, I think that's just going to be a big meta changer. And seeing it on Gatekeeper would make a ton of people happy and also just make Gatekeeper extremely relevant, especially in Ether raids. Now, if we're talking about meta, we cannot go the whole video without bringing up Legendary Robin, as Legendary Robin has just become one of the most powerful supports in the entire game with his Grand Strategy effect, which is essentially like an Omni Unity effect, right? Now, it's only a matter of time until this effect gets nerfed in some way via a new unit, and I think that Gatekeeper could possibly be that unit. Now, I wouldn't put money on it because I do think Intelligent Systems probably wants to sell that effect, but if Gatekeeper got an anti-unity effect, it would just completely break the game. It would essentially allow Gatekeeper to walk in, spit on Robin, and say, "I'm the captain now," and just take over as the best green mage in the game, which I think a lot of people would be happy about. Personally, I'm not so sure just because it would be a nerf to Fallen Ike, and I wouldn't be that happy about it, but it absolutely would be just a ridiculously powerful effect. Now the thing is like, how do you exactly do this? Do you make it so that the enemy can't be debuffed? And if you do that, it's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Because if they don't have Robin, then you're kind of hurting yourself. But if they do have Robin, you just completely hard counter him. So it's going to be interesting if they do add this kind of effect into the game. And if Gatekeeper did get it, he would be extremely meta relevant in pretty much every game mode. Now the second best effect I think he could get is On Guard. That's right, the metiest effect we currently have. And the reason why I think On Guard would be completely and utterly broken on Gatekeeper is because it would essentially turn him into the best Ether Raids defense unit in the entire game. What it essentially would do is make it so that Gatekeeper is blessable so he could be over in Astra season, right? Making your whole team invulnerable to the Bolt Tower, but also at the same time turning off warping, which essentially starts to sound like Gale Force, right? Essentially what he would do is you see Gatekeeper and you'd be like, I can't player phases. It would be so difficult to player phase. You'd essentially have to like hit and a run, or you'd have to play like an enemy phase strategy against that team. And if you were to run something like Gatekeeper even on Dark Season with like Emblem, you could even shut down like save balls as well. So like I think this would just skyrocket Gatekeeper up into the meta strategy. Like he would just become like the best Ether Raids defense unit in the entire game. And I think that would be a really cool role for him to have. Now, I don't know if this will actually happen. Maybe they're trying to like save this for like Summer Medius next year. I don't know. But if Gatekeeper was to get it, oh my god, he would be one extremely powerful unit. But if there is one effect that would completely shake the meta to its core, destroy the meta as it currently is, and make Gatekeeper the god of the meta, it is Anti-Brave. That is right, the Anti-Bridal Catria effect. Bridal Catria has been meta for 2 years now, and it is very much due to Triangle Attack. When you combine that with the warping effect she naturally has, or Guidance 4, it just makes Catria into the best support in the game in my opinion, with like Robin being second. And if Gatekeeper was to show up with Anti-Brave, essentially what he would do would be the hard counter to Bridal Catria, as he already shuts down warping. Being able to turn off Brave effects would just be completely stupid, and it would just completely change how the entire game is played. You would see Gatekeeper pretty much everywhere. You would absolutely see him in Ether Raids offense and Summoner duels, and essentially he would be the unit that would kill Catria balls finally after 2 years, which means that Ether Raid's defense would be completely shaken up, and we would have to create entirely new strategies or just rely on cav lines, which is kind of insane to think about. So if there is one effect that Gatekeeper could get, Anti-Brave is definitely the one that would just completely destroy the meta. But in my opinion, if he was able to get any of the top row, it would immediately make Gatekeeper relevant. And with that, my tier list for Gatekeeper's refined effects is complete. I'd love to hear what you think, what effects you would love to see on Gatekeeper, what kind of role you would love to see Gatekeeper play, if it's like a pure support unit, or if you want to see him more as like a close counter mage, or even just like a bulky unit himself. Whatever role you want to see, make sure to drop a comment down below letting me know. And as always, I'd love to thank all my members for their constant support. And if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. This has been Oblivion. I'll catch you all later.